When watched with a cynical eye, a race isn't so much the experience of watching one driver win as it is watching multiple drivers lose. During the pace laps, all things are possible for every starter, but when the green flag drops, the obstacles arrive faster than the cars. Crashes, mechanical failures, bad pit stops, botched strategies, poor handling, and driver exhaustion, just to name a few. By the time the starter waves the white flag, the field of 40 is often whittled down to 2 remaining challengers. That is until the final corner, where the second place truly becomes the first loser, and the winner celebrates alone. Most of the time, this survival of the fastest begins early in the race, when the leader catches the last place runner. The moment the leader slips by, the field begins to be split into 2 classes. The first, the leaders battling for the win. The second, those trying to get back into the race. But when the leader laps these cars a second time, a third class is formed. For them, the chance at victory all but disappears. Their goal is now to merely make it to the finish. Lap traffic has been a part of racing since the very beginning, and with some of the biggest fields in motorsports, NASCAR has seen it more often than most. When officials wave the blue flag with the orange stripe, suggesting these backmarkers make way for the leaders, one of 2 things can happen. Sometimes they give way, either to the high lane or to the apron, but other times they hold their ground. But it's in these situations that sometimes worlds collide.
Kind of get taken out by the slowest car. I feel like there should be like a driver's test before you get out in a cup car and make sure you know how to drive before you drive one, but I don't know, I guess there isn't.
Unfortunately, these occasional controversies over backmarkers too often distract from the fascinating stories that brought both driver and team to the track in the first place. This was certainly true of our underdogs from the 2004 NASCAR Nextel Cup season, and of one duo in particular. As if by divine retribution, they returned from the brink of extinction in even greater numbers. They aroused anger in some, admiration in others, but each knew 2004 was their chance to rise. They were the Field Fillers! Some drivers become synonymous with a particular track. Dale Earnhardt with Daytona, David Pearson with Darlington, Rusty Wallace with Bristol, Dan Gurney with Riverside. But in one other case, a track, a driver, and even a team seemed destined to cross paths. On March 3, 1991, the NASCAR Winston Cup Series returned to the North Carolina Motor Speedway in Rockingham, North Carolina for the GM Goodwrench 500. Starting 32nd in a field of 40 was one of only 5 Buicks in the grid. Its driver was 27-year-old Andy Hillenburg. Rockingham was a far cry from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, near which as a child the Indy native competed in a soapbox derby with dreams of one day starting the greatest spectacle in racing. Transitioning from his family's construction business to full-time racer, Hillenburg raced everything from midgets and modifieds to F2000s. By 91, Hillenburg had already twice attempted to enter the Indy 500, but the first time the team he signed with shut down, and a year later the deal fell apart just weeks before the race. Frustrated, Hillenburg met with a friend who suggested he try stock car racing instead. Watching a NASCAR Busch Series race at Hickory was enough to convince him. In 1990, he packed a duffel bag with only his clothes, his helmet, and $100, then drove his truck to Charlotte. For 4 days, he slept in that truck across the street from the Charlotte Motor Speedway. That's when he met Ken Schrader, who gave Hillenburg a place to stay for 6 months. He then got a job at the Fast Track High Performance Driving School. Despite his lack of stock car experience, it wasn't long before Hillenburg was not only running the shop as chief instructor, but preparing to buy it. The previous shop owner was who fielded the number 29 that Hillenburg was about to race at Rockingham. Unfortunately, his debut lasted just 6 laps before engine problems. He finished in last place.
I'm with Andy Hillenburg, the 29 car from Indianapolis. And Andy, first of all, sorry to see you out so soon, but did the racetrack conditions have anything to do with your losing control?
No, the motor locked up on me going into 3, and just the rear wheel stopped turning and sent me spinning. So this is my debut in Winston Cup racing. It wasn't what I had in mind, but we got our feet wet anyway, and hopefully we laid a good foundation on building our team.
Tough way to get on television.
Yeah, maybe.
Mike Joy?
Hillenburg's quite a sprint car driver. He led 97 of the 100-lap Hoosier 100 last year. Went out with 3 laps to go due to a flat tire.
October 25th, 1992. The Cup Series returned to Rockingham for the AC Delco 500. For the second time in his life, Stan Hoover Jr. was about to take his father's team to the next level. In 1976, he'd purchased the Stan Hoover Racing Equipment Shop from Stan Sr., once a late model driver. By 1982, Stan Jr. was building the first Hoover chassis race cars. Nearly 300 more would be built in the next decade, accounting for over 1,000 feature wins. He then fielded his own late models from 1989 through 1991 and collected a combined 21 wins with Larry Moore, Davey Johnson, and Paul Davis. But by 92, he set his sights on breaking into Winston Cup racing and entered a car at Rockingham. Ironically, the car Hoover entered wasn't built in his shop. It previously belonged to Team 3 Racing, whose owner Sam McMahon III went bankrupt trying to run a Cup team in '91 without any sponsors. Hoover didn't make the same mistake and signed a few backers, including Daffron's Body Shop in Cortland, 20 minutes up the road from Hoover's shop. Sliding into car number 80 was another Ohio native, a rising open-wheel star looking to make his NASCAR debut. And so, one day after the driver's 30th birthday, the first Cup start for Hoover would also be the first for the Buckeye Bullet, Dave Blaney.
Fellow's a racer, and that's a name you're going to hear more of, Dave Blaney.
Like Hillenburg, Blaney didn't make it to the finish. After 371 laps, handling problems forced him behind the wall. He finished 31st out of 40. From there, Hillenburg and Hoover continued to build their careers, though in different ways. Hillenburg most often served as a test driver. He would test for 20 Cup teams, 2 manufacturers, and even the International Race of Champions. He was a comparatively infrequent competitor in NASCAR's top 3 series, and from 1991 through 2003 made no more than 4 starts for any series in any one year. The results were decidedly mixed. He finished no better than 22nd in Cup, nor 14th in Trucks, and only once ran better than 20th in the Busch Series. Making the most of a one-off start for Joe Gibbs Racing in the 1999 opener at Daytona, Hillenburg charged from 42nd on the grid to find himself in the top 5 with 2 laps to go.
And a big... Oh, trouble! Oh, and one comes upside down. Casey Atwood. And sliding through the grass, Kenton. Winds around. White and yellow flag. Atwood's car is destroyed.
Despite heavy damage after the tangle with Casey Atwood, Hillenburg finished 3rd behind series champions Randy LaJoie and Jeff Green. But it was in ARCA where Hillenburg truly shined. In the first 11 races he ever started, he finished no worse than 10th. This included a 9th in the 1993 ARCA 200, where Kirk Shelmerdine finished 3rd in his series debut, and Jeff Purvis won for James Finch. In 1995, Hillenburg committed to ARCA full-time as a rookie. Once again in the ARCA 200, just his 4th series start, he drove for Ken Schrader, the person who'd taken him in just 5 years earlier.
We welcome you back to Daytona here as Andy Hillenburg. Andy Hillenburg celebrates Timmy Kohut and Andy Hillenburg from Indianapolis, Indiana. And what a hug that is after what they have been through this week. And they climbed down off this Chevrolet. Andy, congratulations on an outstanding effort today.
Thanks, Jerry. All the guys at Schrader Racing, what a job they did for me. Air Orlando, I'd like to thank them. Chevrolet, I'd really like to take a little bit of time here, dedicate this race to my grandmother. She passed away Thursday. And my mom asked me to win this race for her. My mom's never asked me to do anything except don't wreck. And today she asked me to win, and this is for my mom and grandma.
We talked about that this morning, about how important it was for you to get a good finish for your grandmother. After a tough day on Thursday, we mentioned the qualifying, the fact that you burned the piston, and they literally rebuilt this engine in the back of the truck like it's almost like a drag car.
Well, Jimmy Michaels and Neil, they work at Performance Technology. They did a super job. Timmy Coos, I got all the confidence in the world. He's the best crew chief there is, and he just made this thing work. He told me what I had. I got a little excited there at the beginning of the race, and Jimmy Horton, a spotter, and Timmy, they calmed me down and said, you just got to lead the last one.
Any concern about the tires today as Michelle, his wife, and Ashley, his 2-year-old daughter, step in? Any concern about the tires? We're seeing a lot of tires being cut down.
Not from our side. After we made that first stop, Timmy said the tires were great, so I had no concern. I had a little bit of push at the beginning of the race coming off of 2. Timmy dialed it in perfect.
How appropriate you would win here in a Ken Schrader-owned car. When you came south, it was Ken and Annie Schrader that gave you a place to live.
Yeah, they did. Hopefully this is paying them back.
Once again, congratulations, and it's a very, very special day for the Hillenburg family.
Yes, it is. Thanks, Jerry.
Hillenburg then ran the rest of the year with his own team and carried logos for the Fast Track Driving School on his Chevrolets and Oldsmobiles. Demonstrating his versatility, he followed up his Daytona win by winning again on the tight bullring in Flat Rock. By the season finale at Atlanta, he was just 5 points ahead of Bobby Boucher.
He opened up the season at Daytona with a bang by winning the Daytona event in Ken Schrader's car. Then with his own effort, a 3-car effort, 16 out of 20 top 10 finishes plus 2 victories. And Andy Hillenburg, a 5-point lead over Bobby Boucher. It doesn't get any closer than this. How you holding out for today?
Well, it's been a long time, it seems like, since the last race, and it's pretty nerve-wracking. Boy, you go through all the emotions and scenarios of what could happen, and then it comes down to, well, we just got to go out and race and do what we've been doing all year long.
So no special strategy other than to race Bobby Boucher, or what do you do?
I'm going to stick with what we've done all year long. I mean, if we're not leading the race, we're out there going to race the leader, try to keep up with him. If there's a rabbit out there, just make sure we don't get a lap down, early in the race. And the big thing is finishing, but we want to be there in contention all day long.
Now, you've only won, a local track sprint car championship. First national try. The guy who's chasing you has a couple national titles. So, I don't know, that pressure thing, is that a factor?
I don't know. When you really think about it, we weren't supposed to be here anyway. Going in as a rookie, we hadn't run on any of the racetracks except for 3 of them. I would think with the two-time champion there, well, I don't know. Yeah, I keep trying to come up with all the good cliches to say, but there's a lot of pressure. But we're going to, regardless of how we do, it's been a great season for us this year, and we're just looking forward to getting in a great race today.
Now, the last question is not a pressure question. It has to do with 1996. What do you got cooking there?
Well, we're actually, we have something confirmed up for next year. We just can't let everybody know about it just quite yet. Maybe another couple weeks, but we will be down in Daytona and maybe a couple different divisions.
Boucher finished 11th in the finale, while Hillenburg finished 5th. Indiana Andy took the title by 45 points.
And Andy Hillenburg is the 1995 champion. There you go. Way to go, Andy.
But 2 spots ahead of Hillenburg in 3rd was a car that recovered from an early spin, the Hoover Motorsports car, and a returning Dave Blaney. That Atlanta race marked Hoover Motorsports' first ever ARCA start. Ever since Blaney's debut in 1992, the team focused on their Cup program with surprising results. Just days after Rockingham, Blaney attempted to qualify for the famous Hooters 500. His Aquafresh Pontiac was second fastest among the DNQs, trailing only Mike Potter. The next year, Hoover built his own pit equipment and transporter, then prepared 2 cars to run in 1994. The 38-year-old Hoover became the youngest car owner in the garage area, and driver Jimmy Horton raced his unsponsored Ford into the Daytona 500. When Dick Moroso's team missed the cut after Buddy Baker crashed out of his qualifier, Horton carried their sponsorship from Finalube to a strong 19th place finish. Next came future Phoenix Racing driver Joe Ruttman, who backed up a 23rd place finish at Charlotte in '94 to make his own start in the 1995 Daytona 500. By then, the Hoover team adopted a paint scheme that would stay the same for much of their existence.
Is there any significance to the particular paint scheme your team ran? I know for a lot of races you ran kind of that red and white car with the blue numbers. Was that something that he ran in different leagues or something?
No, I kind of always had the red and white. My dirt cars were red and white, and, I always liked them big 3-dimensional numbers some of them guys had, so I just ended up with the blue numbers, and that's kind of how it was.
Was there any significance to running the number 80?
And at the time, there was only, you have to get a number from NASCAR, and there was only so many numbers available. 80's just kind of what I liked, I guess. There used to be a couple local cars here. They used to race like at Heidelberg back in the pavement days in the 70s and the 60s, and they were Fords, and there was always number 80s. They were pretty good running cars, so I kind of leaned towards that, I guess.
Ruttman, too, finished 19th in what became his last Cup start until James Finch called him in 2004. Only after this came Blaney's third-place run in the ARCA finale, then a 7th with Gary Bradbury in the 1997 ARCA 200, a race won by Phoenix Racing and Andy Hillenburg.
Final lap of the 34th ARCA 200. Crew chief talking to Hillenburg, said, hang on, buddy, bottom of the racetrack, and Hillenburg will win it. Carsfield second. And Andy Hillenburg climbs from the car, gets a kiss from his wife, a handshake from his crew, and a big, big smile. Andy, congratulations. I said at the beginning of our show, it's been a picture-perfect week for you, and it's a picture-perfect ending.
Yeah, it is. I tell you what, there's no place better than Victory Lane at Daytona, and just as my buddy always says, a Cinderella story from Indianapolis, Indiana. And boy, I got to thank Gravy Train for getting me here to Daytona, and James Finch and Johnny Allen, Dwayne, all the boys. Diesel Dan wanted me to mention him. I can't mention them all, but they're the ones that put me in Victory Lane. So I got to thank all those people, Ruan, and say hi to all the people back at Fast Track Driving School. We got school going on today at Charlotte. And well, you schooled a lot of guys today, because you had some guys behind you that didn't want you here in Victory Lane, and they were looking to team up on you. Well, I tell you what, they showed they showed how the day was going to be there on that lap 1 start when I got shuffled back to 7th and 8th, and I said, okay, this is the way where boys are playing today, I guess. And boy, I'm so happy, I don't know what to say. Well, you won from the pole here at Daytona. You fought so hard to get in positions like this. You've won the series championship. Now you've won twice here at Daytona. I've never went into the race as a favorite, Bill, in my whole life, and I don't know. I just don't know what to say. I'm so happy. I do. Congratulations. Thank you.
On July 19, 1997, driver and team finally joined forces. Hillenburg, still a team owner in ARCA, climbed behind the wheel of Stan Hoover's number 80 at Pocono and finished in 7th place.
And how did you cross paths with Andy Hillenburg?
Yeah, Hillenburg, I actually knew him from some local dirt racing here, because I sold tires and stuff at all the local racetracks. When he was first getting started, he'd come and race at like Sharon Speedway and Mercer Speedway, those local tracks around here. And so I actually knew him, and then when I got down there, we got back to, kind of got going and ran some ARCA races and some Cup races.
By the time the series returned to the newly reconfigured oval at Atlanta, Hoover and Hillenburg came even closer to reaching Victory Lane together.
Here comes Hillenburg like he is shot out of a canyon. Where did he come from? White flag is in the end. This is the last lap. Andy Hillenburg, half a car length, 3 feet. Out of turn 2, will pull to the inside. The vane is his car length. Keep it right on the bottom, Frank. Spotter telling Kimmel, keep it on the bottom, make him go high around you. Turn 3. And Hillenburg drives it in there, Frank. He's on the inside, they're on the outside. Keep coming. 3 wide, they are door to door for the stripe. Who will it be? Harris Devane! And Harris Devane takes the win. There's contact. Hillenburg spins in turn 1. And wow, what a way to finish the ARCA season in 1997. They come across 3 wide, and Harris Devane gets his first career ARCA victory.
On June 13, 1998, the duo came even closer. Much like his career-best Busch Series run a year later, Hillenburg started 41st at Michigan and finished 2nd, closing within less than 0.2 of a second of Frank Kimmel. Also in '98, Hillenburg drove for the Sadler brothers in the ARCA 200, while Mike Cicchetti ran for Hoover. On the final lap, both drivers were in a tight race for 3rd when this happened.
Fireworks once again as they were battling side by side in turn 4.
Frank Kimmel, 46, Mike Cicchetti in the 80 car. This was a battle for 3rd spot. Kimmel gets out of shape, gets in the side of the 80 car, and Andy Hillenburg, the 95, just misses 46. Now, just misses the 80, comes home in 3rd place.
And remember, they're coming down to take the checkered flag.
Both drivers and teams also attempted the Daytona 500. While Cicchetti missed the cut, Hillenburg made the race and finished 29th. It was the 57th and last Cup start for the Sadler brothers, who had fielded cars in the series part-time since 1984. Toward the end of the '98 season, Hillenburg and Hoover began entering Cup races with eyes on making the 1999 Daytona 500. Unfortunately, they failed to qualify. In 2000, Hillenburg attempted the 500 again, this time driving for Joe Falk. In preseason testing, his 1993 pickup broke down in South Carolina, and he had to hitch a ride from 2 vacationers just to make it to the track. This time, he again missed the show. Hoover's team didn't attempt the race this time and would hire Morgan Shepherd to run a few races that season.
You know, Morgan, he drove for the Woods Brothers, and Woods Brothers were really good guys that work with to help you out. And, you know, I had some motor stuff built at the Woods Brothers, and, you know, Danny Glad always done my motors up there, and it was all pretty good.
Hillenburg, meanwhile, already had his sights set on finally realizing his lifelong dream to race in the Indianapolis 500. Though he'd been busy as a driving instructor, team owner, and stock car racer, Hillenburg still managed to hone his open wheel skills. 3 years earlier, he passed his orientation in Indy Lights, and by 1999 ran a few laps in Ron Himmelgarn's car at Texas Motor Speedway. The time seemed right to enter the Indy 500 in 2000, but the deal very nearly fell apart again. That is, until March, when he received a new backer.
Well, Bill Simpson. Bill Simpson is a great guy. You know, he's been very influential in my race career and a lot of race car drivers, you know, through all the safety equipment and the hard work that he does in the sport. And, you know, back in March, I thought we had it put together. It kind of fell apart and fizzled out on me, and Bill kind of got everything started getting going again.
Together, Hillenburg and Simpson purchased a couple 1999 Dallara chassis from John Menard, forming Fast Track Racing Enterprises Incorporated. Ultimately, the team acquired a current 2000 model that served as the team's primary. Hillenburg would run the number 48, the Sumar Special, so named in honor of the late Pat O'Connor. O'Connor's 1957 pole-winning car was owned by Chapman Root, whose son Preston Root joined Simpson and Usona Purcell as team partners. A few backers and well-wishers joined the effort, which faced its own set of challenges. The car had to be rebuilt after a freak accident leaving pit road kept him from timing in on pole day.
And Andy, we appreciate you coming out. We saw the video. What happened?
Well, we were coming out on the apron, working up to speed, and it turned left. I don't really know. Got it somewhat corrected and shot back across the racetrack in the fence, and really disheartening right now. I mean, you know, we didn't need this. Of course, we run in a high 219 range. Felt like we could run a 220 if we need to. Where we're at now, I'm not really sure, but my crew, they've done an excellent job all week. They built this car up from nothing in a few days, and you know, kind of practiced up. So they're under the gun, and I will be tomorrow.
So you'll have to repair that car to make your run.
Oh yeah, this is all we got right now. You know, the 1999 car is not going to be quick enough, and you know, we ran a high 16 in that car, but I run, you know, a lot of 19s in this car, and they'll get it fixed as good as new, and it's just up to me tomorrow afternoon. And I didn't want to be part of this last-minute bump day drama, but it looks like I just put myself right in the middle of it.
Best of luck. We'll see you Sunday.
I appreciate it, Bill.
On bump day, Hillenburg finally hit the track, ran a 4-lap average of 218.285 miles per hour, then sweated the final few hours of qualifying. When the gun went off, Billy Boat moved him to the 33rd and final spot. With that, the 37-year-old Hillenburg locked himself into his first Indy 500 in his first attempt.
That was the best shot I had, what I worked my whole life for.
Hillenburg finished 28th, out with a wheel bearing issue just before the halfway point.
Andy Hillenburg down the backstretch, the Indiana native who started in sprint cars not too far from here, winning track championships. He's been a stock car driver for the most part in his racing career, but he had the dream of racing at Indy, but he's on the warm-up lane and headed for the pit area. This is the Sumar Special presented by Irwindale Speedway. Hillenburg wanted so much to race at Indianapolis, I am told, that even on his wedding altar, he turned to his best man and said, "Boy, someday I sure hope to drive at Indianapolis."
Hillenburg returned to Indianapolis in 2001, this time to attempt his first Brickyard 400. It was his fourth attempt with a new startup team founded by Beth Ann Morgenthau, who used her initials to call her program BAM Racing. In June, Hillenburg and BAM entered the Winston West race at Kansas, where they finished a strong third behind Frank Kimmel and John Wood. But in all 4 of Hillenburg's Cup attempts, BAM's Pontiac missed the show. The next year, Shauna Robinson would take over the ride as the team switched to Dodge. Hillenburg found his way to Marcus Auto Racing, and along with Robinson would fill several short fields in the early stages of the 2002 season. With Marcus, Hillenburg finished last at Darlington, Martinsville, and the No Bull Sprint at Charlotte. Hoover, meanwhile, failed to make the 2001 Daytona 500 with Morgan Shepherd in an old Wood Brothers car, then missed the cut again in 2002 with Kirk Shelmerdine in returning sponsorship from Hooters. At the time of Shelmerdine's DNQ, reports were that Hillenburg would attempt more races with the team, but instead he tested Ricky Rudd's car at Talladega as Rudd recovered from back surgery. The two wouldn't find each other again until the ARCA opener in 2003. In the ARCA 200, Hillenburg finished 8th with Hoover, already his 9th top 10 finish in just 11 starts in the race. The two planned to go for the season championship with motors from GP Racing Engines, but after a 29th place finish in the second race in Atlanta, the team immediately scaled back. Hoover wouldn't return until late in the year, when Rick McMillian made his only 3 series starts with a best finish of 14th at Salem. Hillenburg, meanwhile, made just one NASCAR start, his 4th and last in the Truck Series, finishing 15th in his own truck during the season opener. But by the off-season, Hillenburg was already planning to reunite with Hoover yet again, and this time make a push to re-enter the Cup Series. The duo planned to make their debut in the season's 4th race in Atlanta. During Speed Weeks 2004, Hillenburg made his 12th ARCA 200 start, and for only the second time in his own car. His number 10 NER Building Restoration Chevrolet was joined by midget racer AJ Fike in the number 11. Fike ran the full season in the number his team owner drove to the championship 9 years earlier. On July 3rd, he finished runner-up to Frank Kimmel at the Berlin Raceway, one of 3 top 5 finishes on his way to taking 7th in the series standings. Hillenburg crashed out at Daytona, finishing 36th in what would be his only ARCA start of the year as a driver. These 7 drivers would run the second entry for the rest of the year. Of them, only Kelly Kovsky's run at DuQuoin lasted more than 21 laps and resulted in a finish better than 27th. While Hillenburg continued to prepare for the Cup race at Atlanta, he landed a ride with Junie Donlavey after Morgan Shepherd's deal for the Daytona 500 fell through. As with Kirk Shelmerdine's DNQ the previous year, Donlavey's superspeedway car was painted flat black, and among its few sponsors was returning backing from AccuTurn. As the team struggled for speed, the team soon added a quarter panel decal for Joe Manchin III, who was running for governor of West Virginia. On the hood appeared a logo for the Music City Motorplex, Joe Mattioli III's new rebranding of the famous Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway. "It'll be fun," said Mattioli on February 12th, "and it will give our track some national exposure." After running slowest of the 45 drivers in qualifying, Hillenburg lost touch with the pack on the first lap of his qualifying race. With 17 laps to go, he was pushed behind the wall, out of the race, and out of the 500. He joined Kirk Shelmerdine on the early ride home. With news of the short field in Rockingham, Hillenburg was originally listed to drive for Donlavey again, but the deal fell through.
Coming into the 2004 season, you were originally planning on making your debut at Atlanta, but you moved that up to Rockingham with the short field. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Well, I really wasn't even ready to race quite then, and Hillenburg was at Daytona, and he called me and said, "Listen, man, they're going to be short on cars. You know, if you really want to get going, now's the time for opportunity."
Hoover and Hillenburg looked to move up their debut to Rockingham, but there wasn't enough time to put together a car to help fill out the field. That is, until, guess who? Brett Bodine. Bodine had that same weekend been looking for a new sponsor to help keep his team going. To help settle his debts, however, he sold Hoover one of his cars, which Hoover and the team's 2 full-time crew members redecorated into the team's familiar red and white. One of these crew members was the engine builder, who cobbled together old parts into an engine Hillenburg jokingly called his chef's surprise. Commercial Truck and Trailer, a longtime supporter of Hoover's team, had their logos on the quarter panels.
I know Commercial Truck and Trailer was on board there. Was that like some friends of yours, or?
Yeah, they've been in business for probably 50, 60 years. They're from Girard, Ohio. They have a big truck and trailer repair center and parts department. You know, over-the-road guys from all over the country stop in here and get their trucks and trailers worked on, and he's always been a big-time race fan, and I'm pretty good friends with him, and always done business with him, and, you know, he'd help me out here and there, and I'd run his ad pretty big on my car, so it looked good on a racetrack, you know.
There's a small window of opportunity to get back into this garage for a few teams, and that window will probably be closed by Atlanta, said Hillenburg. More cars will come. Hillenburg also disliked the label of field filler. I would rather be called something else, he said in March. In the 70s, it was a little more glamorous. It was called independent. Everything we do is a struggle, but I'm proud of this team, and when we build into this what we want it to become, then maybe I think they'll start calling us independents again.
What were your expectations that season? Was the goal to run like the full season, or?
Yeah, I wanted to run as many races as I could. I really wanted to run all the races. When you do it out of your own pocket, and it's just pretty hard to do, but you would get some pretty good prize money. You could kind of keep going. But, if you tore up a car or something, it really set you back, and we tore up a few cars. But, it was just to run as many laps as I could. My goal was always to want, finish on a lead lap, if possible.
About how many cars did you have at your disposal that season?
I had 6 cars. We kind of rotate around, and, we lost a couple cars and tried building a couple cars as we went, because your Daytona Talladega car, they're only good for those 2 places, so they're just going to be sitting there most of the time,
Andy Hillenburg on track, the 1995 ARCA Series champ. Brings a Ford here, unsponsored.
Didn't get many laps of practice. They had some trouble actually getting this car through inspection, and then troubles when practice started. Only got 11 laps of practice in. 25-22, 30th quickest out of the 31 cars that is qualified.
But that'll make the show in that the way this field is determined. 38 drivers from time trials and 5 provisionals. Now, provisionals only available to teams that finished in the top 45 in the 2003 standings. So if that still leaves positions unfilled, then we revert back to qualifying times until we have a 43-car field. So everyone will be there.
Yeah, Mike, we had 45 cars here. You may have talked about this earlier. Morgan Shepherd withdrew, and then the 59 car, Andy Belmont, he crashed in practice. So right now we have 43 cars that's going to take the clock. That should be the 43 cars that are in the field for Sunday.
After qualifying at a speed of 146.86 miles per hour, Hillenburg secured the 43rd and final starting spot for what would be his first Cup start in nearly 2 years, and the first for Hoover since 1995. Appropriately, both Hillenburg and Hoover would start the final Cup race held at Rockingham, the track where each had made their series debut. I don't want to look like we're trying to capitalize on anything, but this is our window of opportunity, said Hillenburg. We're not here to go 2 laps and try to get a check. We're here to do the best we can. The team's pit crew were some of Hoover's friends who drove down from Ohio for, quote, a thanks and a sandwich. The crew's first stop took 36.5 seconds. Hillenburg finished 34th, 17 laps down to race winner Matt Kenseth. Along with Derek Cope and Arnold Motorsports, Hillenburg and Hoover were the only field fillers in the race who finished the race without incident. Despite having moved up the start of their return to Cup competition, Hillenburg and Hoover were already planning to run as many as 20 of the remaining 34 races in 2004. The team withdrew from the following round in Las Vegas and instead prepared for their originally scheduled debut in Atlanta. After qualifying, the Lowe's Motor Speedway in Charlotte purchased space on the hood for their upcoming races in May, and the Orange County Auto Auction purchased space on the rear of the car. Once again, the number 80 started 43rd and last on the grid in Atlanta, but suffered an embarrassing setback.
Car number 80 is stalled down on the apron in turn number 1. That's Andy Hillenburg. And they'll have to get Andy going. Andy Hillenburg's car would not fire, so they're going to haul it back to the garage. He will still get credited with a 43rd place finish, should he not be able to refire that car.
Hillenburg was handed a redundant tail end penalty before the start for failure to keep pace. It made it just 15 laps before he dropped out, citing engine trouble. Unfortunately for both driver and team, things were about to get much worse. Darlington came next on March 21st, where Hillenburg started 43rd for the 3rd straight time. He did so with a year-old engine Roush Racing sold him, that arrived the previous Tuesday. Up at the front of the pack, Casey Kane, Greg Biffle, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. battled for the lead, while Derek Cope held on after he started 5th for Arnold Motorsports. After the caution for Morgan Shepherd's near miss of Michael Waltrip's crash on lap 9, Hillenburg came in to change his sticker tires and put on 4-lap scuffs, looking to save his other 2 sets of sticker tires for later in the race. It was a decision he'd come to regret. The Sporting News would later report that Hillenburg, running 39th at the time, was traveling above NASCAR's minimum speed, which had increased during the weekend. NASCAR had originally announced the minimum would be 85% of the fastest lap in happy hour, which that day would have been 141.353 miles per hour, but by Sunday morning it had changed to 142.539 miles per hour, or 34.5 seconds.
Caution is out at lap 28. Andy Hillenburg, lapped car, spun, and Jeff Gordon, who came in here 5th in the Nextel Cup points, piled into Hillenburg. Jeff is okay. Let's show you what happened.
Well, the 80 car's up there in the groove, and here comes Tony, and Tony gives him a little tap, trying to get him down out of the way, and he turns him around, and Jeff, you just can't turn down right there. There's no way to stop. There's no way to turn. Jeff was hoping maybe the 80 would go down the hill. He could get by on the outside, but it just did not happen for him.
And Jeff had Elliott Sadler right underneath him.
He was forced up to the high side, and then the only thing he could hope for was that 80 car would slide down the hill.
And I think a split second later, he would have slid down the hill.
Yep. Just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
See, Gordon started to turn down, but there was just no way to clear him. Jamie McMurray scoots through on the apron.
This is all happening down there in the center of the corner at about 150-60 miles per hour.
The lap previous, 2 cars that had trouble getting by Hillenburg had to really woe up on the brakes and go underneath them.
Cars do hit the wall here and go down, but it takes them a little bit longer because your corner speed is so slow. You're not going fast enough through the corner to hit the wall and it shoots you down the racetrack. You kind of hit it and then go along and then slide down.
Jeff Gordon comes in here 5th in points, 22 starts here, 14 top 10 finishes, but it won't happen today, and that's going to be a big hit for him in this points.
For Gordon, it was one of the hardest hits of his career.
Just come out of the care center. How are you?
I'm sore. I tell you, I hadn't taken a hit like that in a long time, if ever. So, you know, I hate it that it happened. I mean, car was just really starting to come to me, and long race here at Darlington. Last thing you want is an incident like that. And you know, I know it wasn't Andy Hillenburg's fault, but there's a lot of guys out there that don't belong out there that are just so far off the pace that, you know, on a narrow track like this, something needs to be done about that. But you know, our day's over, and we're just going to the next one.
6-time winner here at Darlington, a real tough day today.
And then what Jeff is saying is, on a track like this, it's a single groove racetrack. It's hard enough to drive a good fast car here. It's miserable to try to drive a slow car here and stay out of people's way. Every time you move down out of the way, you pick up debris on your tires, makes the car drive that much worse, goes that much slower.
Hillenburg was disappointed and embarrassed.
With Andy Hillenburg, what happened out there, Andy?
I wiggled up in front of the 20 car there, and I mean, you know, you come in here and this is the big boys, and slow car and a fast car, and fast car hits a slow car, and it's the slow car's fault, and we'll go back and build us a faster car, and someday we'll be back and we'll be the faster car.
Is he okay in there?
I'm fine. Sorry for Jeff Gordon. I feel bad. It's a race car driver's worst nightmares to come here and take out one of the heroes, and all the Gordon fans, sorry.
That car was completely wiped out. It was like beyond repair. And it was kind of a bad deal, you know. You know, we were like kind of on a straightaway by ourselves, and we were going to get lapped by Stewart. You know, and he was fast enough. He just could kind of just drove right around you, but you know, he got in and spun us there. And there's Gordon, and his spotter evidently wasn't paying attention because he was 13 seconds behind us. You know, and everybody kind of wanted to blame us for the wreck, and I'm like, listen, you know, when you're 13 seconds back and you run into a guy, it's probably need to be talking to your spotter.
Were you able to have a conversation with Gordon's spotter or the team there at all, or was that?
No, we never really. You know, we just kind of minded our own business, stayed out of trouble, didn't make no waves. You know, when you're a small team, that's kind of what you got to do.
Much like Joe Ruttman's early exit at Rockingham, Hillenburg's wreck became a lightning rod for controversy. Rick Hendrick was furious. If those guys can't get out of the way, then they shouldn't be there, he said. Jeff Gordon suggested the implementation of the 107% rule that was used for Formula One in qualifying. From there, the media debated over everything from adjusting the minimum speed to reducing the 43-car field. Surprisingly, NASCAR didn't bend to the pressure. On March 23rd, NASCAR's Jim Hunter, a former track president at Darlington, concluded it was just a racing incident. "It's racing," he said. "There are always going to be slower people. Not everybody is going to be running as fast as the leader." Going forward, Cup director John Darby announced he'd encourage communication between established drivers and field fillers so they could understand where they should run on the track, what lines to avoid, and how to be consistent. Even Mike Helton took an unusually bold stance in favor of the underfunded teams, as said by Mike Joy in this clip.
Talk with Mike Helton this week about fellows like Andy, the fellows who fill the field and are doing their best. He says, look, NASCAR has always been about free enterprise. Here are the rules. Bring a legal car, run it as fast as you can. Let's see how well you can do. He said to eliminate anybody from having that opportunity would fly in the face of what NASCAR stood for since its inception.
The following race was Bristol, where Steve Burns invited Hillenburg to be interviewed trackside with a group of fans.
And we're now joined by Andy Hillenburg. Now, Andy, you were in a bit of controversy at Darlington last week, and you crashed early, got hit from behind. You were very contrite about it. You said it was every driver's worst nightmare because Jeff Gordon got into it and it ruined his day. There's been a lot of talk this week about so-called field fillers, some of it not very complimentary. Your thoughts a week later?
Well, you're not going to change anybody's opinion. I mean, the cool thing about racing is everybody's got a driver they really like, they really love, and I mean, racing is the coolest sport on the planet, and and you know, there's nothing that I can say to the fans that basically think I'm an idiot. I mean, whenever you strap on the driving uniform and you walk out in front of the crowd, you're taking a chance. You might get booed, you might be cheered, but you know, one thing that they can always count on from me that, you know, I'm going to be doing my best.
What was happening in your mind right there?
Well, I was saying a lot of things I probably can't repeat here, Steve, because I can't afford to pay any fines.
Well, at least you're honest.
You know, that part there really, it really stung a little bit, but, you know, it's really tough. I mean, last week we got our block knocked off. I mean, it just knocked off, and it clean across the parking lot. And you know, Monday morning it was really tough to get up and say, you know, we're doing the right thing. We can build a program. I'm not going to come here and start 43rd and finish 43rd all season long. If you told me right now, if you could pull out a book and say, that's the best you got, Andy, well, I'm going to hit the beach and come out here and join this crowd here and have some fun.
Hillenburg also responded to the criticism he faced from many in the media.
How about the criticism that you've endured, you know, where some journalists, frankly, have said if you're not at that minimum speed, you shouldn't be on the racetrack?
You're stepping into the arena, and you can't get 100% approval from everybody, and all you can do is your best. I mean, I've got 4 kids, ages 11, 8, 7, and be 3 in May. And if they're getting pounded, and actually this happened last fall in the soccer season, they only won 1 game all year long. Geez, Dad, we really need to go? Yes, you got to go. You go and you do your best and you put forth your best effort. And that's what I'm teaching my kids. How can I go out here and say, oh, I can't do it? I mean, I think that for the most part, the biggest criticism are either, and if you don't fall in this category and you criticize me, please accept my apologies. But you have the stars, okay? They're stars in anything, basketball, football, baseball. Things happen differently to them, and that's cool because that's what makes them stars. Thank you. And then you got people that ride the bench that never bothered to get into the game to play. And those are the 2 groups that single out people like me and in this audience and you're in the job that never took the chance to try.
As the interview continued, fans got to learn even more about the life of one of the so-called field fillers.
You know, Andy, a lot of people may not realize this. You know, this isn't the first time you've jumped into a race car. You were a champion in the ARCA Series. You've won a lot of races. So, and you said it earlier, you're putting your best foot forward, but you're racing at the very elite level of stock car racing.
Well, yeah, this is the hardest that it gets. And, you know, I don't like to talk about what I've got to do. I'm very proud of what I've accomplished in my career. But if you have to sit there and convince somebody, like sit there and tell them how good you are, I don't think it really counts. So, I mean, I'll let my friend Steve stand up and say, you know, hey, you've got to do a lot, and that's really cool because I'm very humble. I'm proud of what I've got to do, and it hasn't been easy, and I hope to accomplish a little bit more.
I've got a question for you. What is your personal vehicle? What do you drive?
I drive a PT Cruiser. It's got 75,000 miles on it. My wife has a minivan because we've got 4 kids. And I do have a nice little 67 Chevrolet pickup. And the one, and I've got a Ford pickup that I pull all of our show cars and stuff for the driving school. So I am covered every manufacturer there.
With the former Brett Bodine car a complete loss after running 3 races, Hoover's team was faced with the daunting task of putting together a short track car in just a few days. That's where several undisclosed crew members from other teams came by the shop to lend a hand. Soon, another Ford was ready to tackle the high banks. Hillenburg qualified last for a 4th straight time. He followed Joe Ruttman to the garage area, and for the first time in 2004, finished in 43rd place. Hillenburg failed to qualify for the next race at Texas, but made the show at Martinsville and finally started 42nd. Just like Daytona, in both races he carried a political advertisement on his car. This time it was GM's former media relations guy, Kevin Triplett, who retired as NASCAR's managing director of business relations the previous June to run for Congress. He'd run as a Republican against 22-year veteran Rick Boucher in Virginia's 9th Congressional District. Triplett would lose the election by 50,000 votes, and Hillenburg's race was also cut short.
But car in the wall. And hard, Andy Hillenburg slammed it with the right front in turn 3.
Caution is out.
Joe Ruttman has gone to the garage, and it gives us a second as we check on the condition of Andy Hillenburg to talk about the difference in a turn that's come up this year.
Andy, all right?
We'll check on that in a moment. Little damage to the right rear, heavy damage to the right front for Andy Hillenburg.
After this 41st place finish, the Hoover team withdrew from Talladega and didn't enter the following round in Fontana. When the team next unloaded in Richmond, a different driver was behind the wheel. 2-time NASCAR Busch Series champion Randy LaJoie made a combined 5 Busch and Truck Series starts in early 2004, but hadn't started a Cup Series race since September 19, 1999 at New Hampshire. He got his chance in Hoover's car, but like Hillenburg, still struggled. He lost the brakes in practice and hit the wall, then ran a cautious lap in qualifying that put him 43rd on the grid. He fell out after just 36 laps, out with a vibration for the team's second last place finish of the year. This appeared to be a one-off driver change as Hillenburg returned for both the Nextel Open, where he ran 15th, and the Coca-Cola 600, where he failed to qualify. But after the team skipped Dover and Hillenburg failed to qualify again at Pocono, the team withdrew from Michigan, marking the final time Indiana Andy was entered in the number 80 car.
And Hillenburg kind of split up.
Yeah.
We missed a couple races in a row, and I was just kind of broke and needed to do something different. And we missed like Texas and Pocono, and again they're like a month apart. It took me that long to get going again, but we unloaded off the trailer and qualified like 26th, which was really pretty awesome for a guy with no money.
The team then seemed to disappear through the summer, not even entering the next 4 races at Sears Point, Daytona, Chicagoland, and Loudon. But when the series returned to Pocono on August 1st, Hillenburg was now driving for John Carter, while another familiar face took his place at Hoover. The story of Carl Long will be the subject of our next episode, but he has a cameo in this one. With still limited sponsorship and wearing a white Impact Racing uniform, Long secured the 43rd and final starting spot at Pocono, while Hillenburg failed to qualify. The first time all season, the number 80 was parked for running too slow after 44 laps, 4 laps after Kirk Shelberdine's day ended for the same reason. Hoover didn't run the following week in Indianapolis, and made their first road course start of the season at Watkins Glen. Tony Ave was a Trans Am competitor who, like Hillenburg, looked to make the jump from NASCAR test driver to full-time competitor. The previous fall, Ave finished a strong 3rd in the ARCA race at Talladega, following Paul Menard and Billy Venturini. He even raced snowmobiles, and in 1993 was crowned the Pro Sprint World Snowmobile Champion. For the Glen, Ave's car carried sponsorship from Comet Tracker, a GPS service, and Lammers Racing, the Trans Am effort that fielded his Corvettes. His Trans Am team had an affiliation with Joe Gibbs Racing, which was the reason he ran a Chevrolet in place of Hoover's traditional Fords. Thanks to Hoover's rank and owner points, he was assured his Cup debut despite qualifying being rained out. After starting 42nd, he came the closest the team had to finishing on the lead lap. Despite damage to the grille, he turned all but 6 laps and finished in 31st. The run earned Ave an Underdog of the Week feature on RacingUnderdog.com. Dave Lawrence pointed out the run gave Hoover's team a 92-point cushion on 46th in owners' points, putting them a step closer to securing the final spot guaranteed provisionals for the start of the 2005 season. After skipping Michigan, Hoover kept Ave on for their next attempt at Bristol. There, Ave spun in practice but avoided serious damage. He then went out to qualify.
He will announce. Yep. Most of them revolving around whether or not 2005 will be Rusty's last year of competition at this level. Wait and see.
Tony Abbey in the 80 car.
Yep, second Nextel Cup Series race for Tony. Made his debut at Watkins Glen.
That was ugly. That started ugly. He spun out earlier today about that spot there. But luckily did not spin out in that spot.
And he's not going to get as lucky this time. This morning he spun out, didn't hit anything hard. But he has marked up the inside wall with the front of his car.
Yeah,
it started ugly in 1 and continued to get worse.
It was real ugly going off turn 4.
That's too bad. Tony Abe, a veteran of open wheel racing.
This is what we talked about when you jump on the gas and you just hope it sticks, and it didn't stick.
Did not stick a lick.
The front tire stuck.
These are just not good sounds right here.
It doesn't look like he hit that wall very hard, but you know what? Pretty hard.
I'll tell you what, it doesn't take a whole lot for these cars to spin off this corner.
Tony out of the car and walking away for the mandatory trip to the care center. Safe to say he may be one of the drivers not in the Sharpie 500 tomorrow night. Red flag is out, Marty.
Ave missed the show and wouldn't attempt another Cup race for 5 years. The team skipped Fontana, where Hillenburg drove one of the movie cars for the upcoming film Herbie Fully Loaded, just the latest in a series of collaborations between the film industry and his fast-track driving school. Among these films were NASCAR 3D, released that season in IMAX, and 3, ESPN's biopic on Dale Earnhardt, which was still in production at the time. Hoover returned at Richmond, where Carl Long returned for the first time since Pocono. Also a first was the car number, 08. The team had switched car numbers to accommodate Joe Gibbs Racing, who was entering their part-time number 80 team with Mike Bliss aboard. While Long failed to qualify, Bliss ran an impressive 4th, 3 spots ahead of Mike Wallace in Phoenix Racing. The chase kickoff in New Hampshire saw Hoover hire Ted Christopher, who made his Cup debut with Kirk Shelmerdine Racing earlier that summer. This time, Christopher didn't run nearly as long. Engine trouble was cited for his exit after 17 laps, making him the 3rd different driver to finish last with the team in 2004. Derek Cope then made an attempt with the team at Dover, followed by Carl Long again at Talladega, but each time the car failed to qualify. By Martinsville on October 24th, the team brought on another driver, who would go on to become a team owner, Mario Gosselin. The Canadian was the 1997 champion of the Hooters Pro Cup Series, where he scored 19 wins in his number 10. It was quite a jump to the Nextel Cup Series, but Gosselin was ready. He qualified 42nd in the 43 car field, but was then docked for using an expired Hutchins restraint device. The device, made in September 2001, was more than a year past its printed expiration date. In the race, Gosselin turned just 74 laps before suspension issues left him 41st. At Atlanta, Hoover hired Andy Belmont, another name we'll become more familiar with later in this series. Belmont failed to qualify, as did Gosselin when he returned to the driver's seat at Phoenix. But the washed-out qualifying session at Darlington put Gosselin into his first ever Southern 500. The team also welcomed new sponsorship from Odessa Impact Total Loss Management. As at Pocono, however, the number 80 was running too slow and pulled off the track after just 14 laps. As of today, these starts still remain Gosselin's only 2 as a Cup Series driver. Carl Long then missed the show at Homestead, their 13th DNQ in 26 attempts, exactly 50-50 on the year. Unfortunately, Hover Motorsports' late season slide dropped him to 46th in owner points at season's end, just 7 points behind Carter Racing, who made 3 fewer starts. The team returned to attempt the 2005 Daytona 500 regardless, again with Andy Belmont, then in 2006 with Carl Long, but failed to qualify both times. The team made their final 3 ARCA starts in 2007 with Wayman Whitman and John Gill. Gill ran 12th on the Springfield Dirt Track, which was the team's best finish since Hillenburg ran 8th in the 2003 ARCA 200. Soon, the sport's changes, however, squeezed Hover out of the sport entirely.
After the 2004 season, was kind of your focus more on ARCA, or was still the site to run some more Cup races?
Yeah, I mean, I really wanted to run the Cup stuff, but I just couldn't afford it any longer. And like, they were coming out with the new motor stuff, and the small teams, you couldn't buy any of it. So, you know, it was going to be probably 4th of July, midway through the year, before you could buy new cylinder heads and stuff. All the big teams were getting them, and, you know, you were going to be at another 40, 50 horsepower disadvantage again, and, you know, you just couldn't go there every week and not make any races. You know, you had to make them races to keep going because you needed that money. And so we just started running some more ARCA stuff after that. And then the COT, when I come out in like 2006, that actually is what kind of really put me out of business, really, because you had to have a COT car at Daytona, and I wasn't even going to get my first roll cage for a COT car till end of April.
Today, 15 years after he last fielded a Cup car, Hover remains in business, putting race cars together for other drivers and teams.
Yeah, dirt cars, and actually I do a little bit of everything. Some short track asphalt modifieds, some dirt super late models, some asphalt super late models, and I even do a few drag cars. Probably going to be March or April before we really get going with some stuff of our own, and then we'll probably try to run just a limited schedule, but it'll probably be maybe a few Lucas Oil races, a few World Outlaw races, all in the late model series, be all dirt stuff. Well, you know, I had some really good drivers. You know, first off, when you're under a funded team, it's hard to get a really top driver anyhow, but through the years I did have some. You know, Hillenburg was really a good guy. In ARCA deal, we were really good, ran good, had good finishes, never tore anything up. You know, Gary Bradbury ran for me a couple times. He was a great guy. Joe Rutman, he ran for me in some Cup races, and when I was a kid, I used to watch him race at Sharon Speedway, you know, and he was always had super good feel. And, you know, Carl Long, we got along really good, and we ran pretty decent. You know, all the guys I had were really pretty good. You know, Morgan Shepherd, we got along really good. You know, he would never put a scratch on a car. Same thing with Rutman. So for a guy like me, those guys were great drivers.
After parting ways with Hover, Andy Hillenburg never qualified for another Cup race. In 2007, he tried to bring his own team to the Cup Series, putting his ARCA rival Frank Kimmel behind the wheel of a fast-track Ford. Kimmel finished 20th out of 30 in the second Gatorade Duel, but missed the field for the Daytona 500. Later that same year, Hillenburg's career would go full circle. On October 2nd, Rockingham Speedway went up for auction. The track was 75 miles away, and bidding wouldn't start until 1 p.m. But knowing his racing luck, Hillenburg left his home at dawn. "I've had so many races that got away because of an empty fuel tank or a flat tire, a spark plug breaking," he said. "I didn't want it to happen on the way here." He arrived a full 4 hours early, the first of 8 bidders to register. The bidding started at $10 million, fell all the way to $2 million, then rose again to $3.5. Only then did Hillenburg put in his bid at $4 million. Even after a break, no one else outbid him. With that, Hillenburg became the owner of the track where he'd both raced and taught others to do the same. He brought NASCAR back to the Rock in 2012 for the first of 2 Truck Series races. Casey Kane won the first, Kyle Larson the second, before the track changed hands again. Today, Hillenburg continues to focus on building his ARCA team. Just this year, he entered 4 cars in the ARCA 200, the same event where he'd experienced so much of his success as a driver. But Hillenburg isn't the only driver from 2004 who still operates a team today, nor was he the only field filler to steal headlines that year at Rockingham.
America, there exists a sport that is driven by the fans. They are why everyone works so hard, on the teams and at the tracks, in front of the grandstands and behind the scenes, to give the fans the greatest race possible. NASCAR fans deserve the best, starting from the high banks of Daytona, all the way to the shores of California, and at every race in between. NASCAR fans, you're the reason for our success. Thanks.